I don't think that there is a character in the Bible that's been analyzed as much as Abraham. First of all, we read about Abraham in the regular cycle of our yearly reading of the Torah, and we get a whole arc of his character, and we see that he has a righteous side and a not-so-righteous side. But then, Jewish tradition has us read two separate highlighted sections on Rosh HaShanah, two of his not-so-righteous moments. Yesterday we read when Isaac was born, and then Ishmael and Hagar are sent away because Sarah wants them to go. Today we read of Abraham coming this close to sacrificing his son. These are not the stories that I want to hear about. This guy is considered the first one of our people, and in fact, the first one of Islam and Christianity as well. We should be telling uplifting stories, right? We should be telling about military victories or his long journey from Canaan, into Canaan from where he was from. But instead, the rabbis, by choosing these exact passages, wanted us to focus on two of the moments in the great Abraham's life where his judgment is suspect, where he acted in a questionable manner. And I get the feeling that by placing these stories in the High Holy Days, they were creating a kal vachomer, which is a rabbinical concept. If something is true in an extraordinary case, then it must also be true in an ordinary case. So for us, gathering for Cheshbon HaNefesh, which is what we do during the Yamim Norim, these 10 days of awe, which is taking stock of our souls, we hear the story about Abraham so that we can say, wow, if Abraham, who was one of the greatest characters in all of the Bible, had these difficulty and faulty moments in his life, I can accept that my difficulties and faulty moments in my life are just part of the human experience. I'm okay with it then. I also think that they ensured that Abraham would be analyzed for eternity. So there are two moments in Abraham's life represented in the same Torah portion, Vayera, which incidentally is my bar mitzvah portion. My mother remembered that. And when it's filtered through Strive to be Human, it brings up what I think is a really difficult question to swallow. So I want us to go through these two parts, and then I'll pose the question to you. First, there's Sodom and Gomorrah. God decides to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and wondered whether Abraham should know the plan. And as proof that God should tell Abraham the plan, this is what God says about Abraham right before God tells him. Quote, this is Genesis 18:19. For I have known him to the end, that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of Adonai to do righteousness and justice. Basically, Abraham and his descendants are going to strive to be human, strive to be righteous, strive to be just. That's Abraham. So Abraham shows up, God tells him, quote, truly the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and verily their sin is exceedingly grievous. I will go down now and see whether they have done according to the cry I have heard. If not, I will know. So after hearing that, Abraham proceeds to argue with God not to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. First, Abraham says, what if there's 50 righteous people? Are you going to destroy the righteous with the wicked? Then what if there's 40, then 30, and so on until he gets to 10. God says, that's enough. If I find 10, I won't. And then God leaves Abraham. So his argue is that God can't kill the righteous along with the wicked, and according to Abraham's logic, you also can't kill the wicked if there are righteous people around. So I imagine that Abraham thought that these horrible, despicable, sinful, terrible people who he did not know had the potential to change. Strive to be human, Abraham. It's about a 10-verse argument where Abraham becomes so outraged that at one point he cries out, "Shall not the judge of the whole earth do justly?" So some time goes by, and we're ending up a little bit later in the Torah, three chapters, and God comes to Abraham in the middle of the night and says, quote, "Take now your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains, which I will tell you about." And Abraham said, oh, he didn't say anything. Why? Why does he spend 10 verses arguing for the most wretched, depraved, inhuman group of people that he had never met? And he spends 0 verses arguing with God when God asks him to kill his own son, without any explanation. Isaac is his most beloved. Why not speak up? Why not question it? After 3 days of your journey to get to the mountain, never questions it. After Isaac says, "Where's the burnt offering?" never questions it. And the biggest problem is that the why, like most interpretations and commentaries, really is just a guess. Abraham Joshua Heschel's reasoning in the prophets goes like this: it was because of the experience of God's responding to him in his plea for Sodom that Abraham did not question the command to sacrifice his beloved son. And here's an answer from Tzvi Freeman, a Chabad rabbi. When God informed Abraham of God's impending judgment on Sodom, he understood what God wanted of him, to argue. Then, when God literally pleads with Abraham, "Please take your son," he then understood that this was not something to argue about. This from Professor Reuven Kimmelman at Brandeis. The story of God testing Abraham's commitment to the covenant turns out to be also a story of Abraham testing God's commitment to the covenant. Elie Wiesel also felt that this act was an act of a defiant gesture to test God. I have to tell you, none of these work for me. I don't get any of those. They're all trying to make Abraham look righteous by either carrying out God's will or standing up to this bizarre request. And as I was writing this, I was thinking, maybe Abraham figured that God would never let this happen, because earlier it was like, I won't destroy the righteous. Isaac is righteous, so there's no way God would destroy Isaac. But it would only make sense to me that if that occurred to him, then Abraham would have made that argument right away. Again, there's no argument. So here's the question I have a really hard time swallowing. Why does Abraham strive to be human for strangers and not his son? Why is it that we would hurt a family member, someone close to us, but we're less likely to do so with a stranger? Why do we become so deeply entrenched in our lives outside of our home that sometimes we fail to see the kind of damage we've done in our home? Why does it seem easier to fight for people across the globe to be treated fairly and without prejudice, and then we quickly and easily judge the people who live with us? Why is it we can lobby for the rights of those we've never met, and yet at the same time we hurt people that are right in front of us, the closest members of our circle? Deborah South Richardson, a psychology professor at Georgia Regents University, who studied the phenomenon that I'm talking about for 3 decades, she explains in the Huffington Post, quote, "It's not the strangers we need to fear." She and other researchers like her focus on defining aggression based on someone's intent, not on whether the aggressive action actually ends up hurting someone. Again, quote, "Whether or not you actually caused harm isn't the critical issue," Richardson explained. "It's that you intended to. If I aim my gun and shoot at you but miss, my intention was still aggression." This is so true of Abraham and Isaac. It doesn't matter that Abraham didn't do it in the end. He had that knife at the ready, and Isaac felt the aggression of that act. They don't talk again. But knowing why someone would do to a family member something they would never do to a stranger is absolutely elusive. Again, Richardson, one of the challenges for even defining and studying aggression is asking how you look in someone's head to figure out what they intended to do. We ourselves aren't always conscious of what we intend to do. She still maintains, though, we are most likely to be aggressive to the people we know and love the most, not strangers. Whether that's because we spend more time with them or because our relationship with them is more significant is still unknown. You can't imagine how frustrating this was for me to find out that nobody knows anything about this. Maybe we feel too comfortable with our family members. If, when you think about it, we don't use the same kind of manners with our family that we reserve for people that are outside of our home. I know that I am much less likely to show a stranger disapproval than I am to my daughters. Maybe I feel like I have the right since they're mine. I can treat them any way I want, right? I mean, maybe that's the way Abraham felt. If it's my family and I need to sacrifice one of them, it only affects me. Oh, yeah, and my wife. But that's it. And by the way, after this near-death debacle, there are no more interactions between Abraham and Sarah as well. And basically in the next chapter, Sarah dies. Perhaps Abraham felt that Isaac would be a willing participant in this action because he had so much respect for his father. Maybe Abraham thought Isaac would never question him. But that may be so, but if that is the case, then why wouldn't he share with him right away what he was about to do if he thought Isaac was going to go along with it? Or maybe Abraham knew that Isaac would never agree. And so he kept it from him because he didn't think it would agree, which actually, there are interpretations, and the Targum, which is Aramaic interpretation of the Bible, actually interprets it that Isaac was encouraging Abraham to actually pull the ropes tighter so that he couldn't struggle away, and that he reaches up his neck so that Abraham has a better view and can more easily cut him. So the problem is that we really don't know Abraham's motivation for not questioning God in this case. But it's gotten me to think about the way I treat my family. Am I quicker to do something they don't like without thinking about their reaction? Do I treat strangers better than I treat my loved ones? Am I freer in causing my family pain? However I answer these questions, or however you answer these questions for yourself, they're just important to ask. The fact is, and I know this from personal experience, from sitting in rooms with families after someone has died and listening to them talk for several hours over the last 20 years, that at the end of our days, it is the love and experience that we have inside of our family that makes the most difference and has the most lasting effect. And if it's true for reasons we just don't understand fully, that it is easier to inflict pain on our loved ones, this has to be something that's right up on the top of our reflection list during this time. And in fact, on the very top of our living list, to be more aware of how we treat our spouses and our children and our parents and our grandparents. May we strive to keep those relationships close and honest and deep for those who are closest to us, for those whom we most love. May we always strive to be human. Ken Yiratzon.